Here by Peggy to give a presentation. I guess she had heard that I'd written a book, and I have. I'm not an author. I worked in contracts in accounting for 35 years, but this is the book that I never wanted to write. It's a book about caring for someone with dementia. My mother was diagnosed in her 80s, and she came to live with me for the last part of her life. And so there was a lot of things that I was curious about, and there was a lot of things that I couldn't find information on readily. I did the usual Dr. Google, and I went to the Alzheimer's Society, and I got lots of information on certain things. And then after my mom passed away, my husband was diagnosed with vascular dementia, but this time I was a little more savvy because I knew what to look for. With my mom, I was making excuses for her for a long time, saying, oh, well, you know, she's 80 and she's forgetful and that sort of thing. And now that I'm getting closer to that age myself, I'm like, well, maybe. I was a little harsh on her. And my husband was about 65 when I started noticing things were going wrong with him. And again, I'm making excuses. Well, he retired. He was an accountant. He was used to being so busy every day, and now he's at home with a cat, you know, so maybe his social interactions aren't as good. And I was saying to Vivian when I was talking to her earlier that even our family doctor, who'd been our doctor for 20, 25 years, wasn't picking up on the clues for Ron. He was kind of siding with him, kind of the old boys thing, oh, well, you know, we're both getting older, and he'd known Ron for so long, and didn't start to think that cognitive decline was that serious. Mind you, having said that, the doctor didn't have to wake up next to my husband in bed one morning and have him look over at me and go, well, who are you? And I said, well, I'm your wife. Like, how many women do you wake up next to in the morning, you know? So, and then he'd go, oh, well, I was just kidding. But it was, you know, those kind of symptoms and signals are quite often apparent. And I thought, I have to do more research on this. So it's a thin book, but it's all the research that I kind of did to deal with my mom and then with my husband. And there's some humorous stories interspersed here about you have to just kind of accept a lot of it with a sense of humor, because it would stress you out even more if you didn't. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is a little bit about the stress of being a care partner, or even being the parent or the child of someone who's going through dementia, and how to maybe manage that stress a little bit more. How many have flown on an airplane? Everybody been on an airplane? Yeah. They always tell you, I know lots of people don't even listen anymore, but when the stewardess comes out and says, you know, the oxygen's going to drop down, and if you're traveling with children, put the oxygen mask on first. And we don't really pay that much attention to that warning, but that's why I call this putting the oxygen mask on first, because you can't help anyone else if you're totally stressed out yourself. And we so often forget to do that. And we forget to do that because we think, well, we're fine, like I'm fine. I shouldn't have to worry about me. You know, it's my mom that has the problem, or it's my husband that has the problem. And so you think your needs are not primary because they're dealing with something that you think is much more serious than what's going on in your life. So you find you're devoting all of your time to taking care of their needs and making sure their needs are met, and you don't often find the right time to take care of your own needs, and it's very important. I'll show you a little picture of what I looked like when I was trying to take care of everybody's needs but my own. Maybe, if this one, what went back? There we go, that's me. I thought I was this person here. I was working, when my mom was with me, my kids were teenagers, and so I had a full-time job, I had kids, I had my mom, and I was involved in my usual social activities and volunteer work, and the kids were going places, and I thought I was just juggling all of that extremely well, smiling, like I'm fine. And people would say to me, including my children, they'd say, Mom, are you all right? And I'm going, I'm fine. I'm fine. And I thought I was fine. Everybody else around me could see that maybe I wasn't fine. And this apparently, you had a sneak preview, but this apparently is what I really was looking like. And that's what happens. You don't really realize you're in a crisis mode until your stress turns into distress. And the little hint for me was I went to see my family doctor, not the same one that my husband saw, and she said to me, you know, how are you doing? And I said, I'm fine. And she said, how are you managing with Ron? Because I'd told her about his dementia. And I said, well, I'm doing really good. I said, but I think I might just take him for a drive out into the country and find a nice farmhouse and drop him off at the end of the road, like you do with a kitten or with, you know, puppies. And she went, I think maybe you're not doing as well as you think you are. And so I actually had to face the fact that, you know, I wasn't really going to take him and leave him at the end of the road, but the thought did cross my mind, and that was kind of scary that I would even start to think like that. Yeah, it was not until I was in crisis mode did I realize that I was not only stressed, but I was distressed. But stress isn't always bad. In small doses, stress is really good for the body. I think Lynn, as a medical student, I mean, you can say that when you're under stress, like you're studying for exams or you're in an emergency situation, you have that rush of cortisol that comes in your body and that adrenaline, and that helps you deal with something. I mean, you may have heard stories of people in a car crash suddenly been able to, you know, lift the car off their child or run 2 miles to get help, and that's what your body does when you're in stress, and you need to have that extra adrenaline or that extra cortisol in your body. But, you know, so what is stress really? It's the body's way of responding to any kind of demand or threat. When you sense danger, whether it's real or imagined, the body defenses kick into high gear, and the rapid automatic process known as the fight or flight reaction to the stress response. So it's the body's way of protecting you. When working properly, it helps you stay focused, energetic, and alert. In emergency situations, stress can save your life, giving you the extra strength to defend yourself, or spurring you on to slam the brakes to avoid an accident. Stress can also help you rise to meet challenges. It's what keeps you on your toes during a presentation at work. I might have a little extra cortisol going through my body right now, making presentations. Whether you're making that final shot for a basket in a game of free throw. But beyond a certain point, stress stops being helpful and starts causing major damage to your health, your mood, your productivity, your relationships, and your quality of life. So this is what happens. Your heart pounds faster, your muscles tighten, your blood pressure rises, your breath quickens, your senses are sharper, and as we mentioned, you could have increased strength or stamina. But that only lasts for so long. It's not a constant state, or hopefully it's not a constant state, because the nervous system can't distinguish between physical and emotional threats. So constantly being in a state of stress causes problems to the body. So if you're constantly under stress and your body's constantly doing that reaction, that's too much for the body to handle. Your body's not meant to be under that kind of stress for that long. So this is what happens when you're constantly under threat. Your immune system is compromised. You may find you're getting colds, or you're getting the flu, or you're getting more illnesses than you had before. Your digestive system, how many of us had our stomachs tighten up and just clench, or you can't eat, or you overeat, and it increases the risk of heart attack and stroke. And this one I really didn't like. It speeds up the aging process, and also you could have mental health problems. So the warning signs of stress, the cognitive signs of stress, that's when normal things that you thought you could do automatically, you're not able to do anymore, or you're not able to process things properly. You're overly emotional about something. even when you think you're not really under stress, I'll give you an example from my own life just the other day. I thought I'm kind of, I got it handled. I wrote the book, I'm good. And then I'm working on a slideshow for this conference that's happening this weekend on early onset dementia. And I thought, well, it'd be nice to have music to that slide show. So I just Googled, songs on dementia, and I found all these wonderful songs, and I started listening to them kind of one after the other to see which one would go with the slideshow. And I got to this one by Martina McBride, and I can't even remember the name of it now, but all of a sudden I heard that song and I burst into tears, and I'm like, well, this is a good way to start 7:45 in the morning. And I hadn't realized that I'd been up late working on this presentation and that I'd actually let some of my defenses down, and just like that, it was an emotional reaction. So the physical, we mentioned that you're tired, perhaps you're not willing to do the things that you wanted to do, and behavioral. Maybe you start lashing out at people. Maybe you seem to be angry or quick to respond in a way that you normally don't. So the things that cause stress, there's external causes, and they're not always sad occasions. I mean, weddings are exciting, they're happy, but they're also stressful. Having a baby, everybody is so excited and happy to have a baby, but it causes a lot of stress, partly because you're not getting that much sleep and your mind is totally focused on the needs of that child and not taking care of your own needs. Sometimes it's money problems that's causing you stress. The other part is the internal causes, and that's what we do to ourselves. That's when we start saying we're not good enough, or that we're not doing a good enough job, or that we expect our life to be happy all the time and it's not, or we're thinking we can fix things in our children or in our parents or in others, that we can make things happen so that life will be perfect. And it's not perfect, and that causes us stress. So I'm sure all of you have had some of these things happen to you, and there was a study done that I thought was pretty interesting, validating these stress levels, and they tried to put a number on what caused you stress. So they have this little quiz here that these are some of the things that you could be stressed out about, and you were supposed to assign that a number. So, and if you added up your numbers all of a sudden and you came up to more than 300, you were in crisis state for stress. So I was kind of thinking, if you got divorced, or maybe you got separated, then you got divorced, and then you got married, or you reconciled, boy, then you were it sounds like a good thing, but these things kind of add up. And retirement even adds a fair amount of stress. I think a lot of people think, well, I'm going to retire, and life is going to be great. But there's also things that influence that. I took early retirement from my job. I worked for the Alberta Research Council for over 30 years, but I took early retirement when my husband was at home and he required more care than I could get with people coming in. He was phoning me 15 times a day, couldn't change the channel on the TV. He didn't know who that stranger was that was in the living room, somebody that was there to take care of him, and he didn't want that stranger in the house. And it was getting very stressful for him, and I thought, I'll just try and eliminate some of those points off his spreadsheet and mine as well, and stay at home and take care of him. So take a look and see if you have, and I'm sure we could add 20 more items to that checklist, but just as for your own information and for your own balance checklist, just maybe take a inventory once in a while and see where you are. If you think you've got a big pile of points building up on the stress checklist, then maybe it's time to really consider doing something about it. As we said, stress triggers the fight or flight response in the body, and it floods with those hormones. How much stress is too much? And that's an individual question for everybody. I personally thought I was capable of handling huge amounts of stress, and I think I was doing pretty well, but I was doing well because of some of these other things that I had in my life. And one is your support network. I have a tremendous number of really good friends. My family, my grown children now are perfect, and my 5 teenage grandchildren are also perfect, but they're a wonderful support network. They're people that you can call and talk to, and maybe for some of you it's even people that you meet here at this Southeast Seniors Association. The people you see, you could just have a coffee with them, you can talk to them, and they're not trying to fix your life, they're just there to support and say, I hear you, I understand you, and that's often all you need to hear, is that somebody hears you. And that leads to that sense of control. I think often we feel that our life is spiraling out of control and there's nothing we can do about it. And that's a terrible feeling. But everybody can take some control for some things in their life. And it's just being aware of the fact that you do have that power to take some of your control back. The attitude and ability to deal with emotions. It's kind of interesting, on the drive over here on CBC Radio, they were interviewing somebody she runs a course for university students on happiness. And I'm kind of thinking, really? Like, what, they're in university, they're young, they're having the time of their life, why don't they know how to be happy? But they're under a lot of stress. So part of dealing with it is changing your attitude and changing your ability to deal with emotions. Like your attitude about things that I can't do anything about it, or this is so terrible. Sometimes you just have to look at it more as not a terrible thing, but a challenge, or look at it as something that I can handle this. And self-talk to yourself. I know it sounds a little bit out there, but I found that really helped for me. I would just kind of say to myself, you know what? You can do this. You can get through this. And I think that can go a long way with helping you deal with your emotions and your knowledge of the situation. And that's where me writing the book came in, is that I wanted to find out as much information as I could for me, because the more knowledge I had, the less afraid I was of the situation and what was going to happen. And then it helped me prepared for the unexpected events. And there's lots of interesting things that happen when you live with someone with dementia that are unexpected events. I was looking after my daughter's dog for her while she was gone away, and she brought, this dog was on special food. It only had to have, I don't know, $80 a bag food or something. But she brought it to me in a plastic Ziploc thing, because I just had the dog for the day. And I was in doing something, cleaning the bathroom, something exciting, and my husband came in and said, what are those new snacks you have on the counter? And I'm like, I said, well, that's Belle, that's the dog's food. He says, oh. He said, well, it's quite tasty. And I'm like, okay. And I figured it wasn't going to kill him. It was really high, good quality dog food, but I don't know. Animals are interesting in your life too, because animals can be a big comfort. They can also stress you out sometimes, but we have a cat. And the cat had my husband's number in spades, because every time he would even go by the kitchen, the cat would go into this big song and dance. I was calling it the Academy Awards for him, because nobody feeds me. If I only had a temptation treat, I could last for another hour. And Ron would dutifully go and get the temptation treats bag and lay out 6 treats. His accounting kicked in. 6 treats on the floor. It was always 6. And the cat would, hoover them up. And then 5 or 10 minutes later, he'd be walking by the kitchen again, and I hear the cat, meow, nobody ever feeds me. And I had to actually lock the treats up because the cat was getting to be like 20 pounds. So I wasn't expecting those things. But there's even worse things that happen that you're not expecting. But just the knowledge of knowing that some of these things might happen, when they do happen, I think gives you a little edge. So how are you, the wine bottle there is not how you handle stress. I just although there were times I thought that was probably a pretty good idea, but no. the idea is to get moving, and you have lots of opportunity in your life to get moving here in this beautiful center. Just going for a walk, just to keep your body active. Connect to others, as I talked about. Don't withhold. I found it was hard for me initially to ask for help because I was supposed to be able to handle it myself. It was my husband, it was my mother. I was, that was my job. And it was very difficult to ask for help. And it's amazing once you connect with people and you say, could you just come by for 15 minutes so I can run to the store and get milk? And they're like, oh, great, Although with dementia, I found we lost a lot of our couple friends in, people don't learn how to deal with that in our society. We don't learn how to deal with dementia. We get frustrated with somebody that asks you 6 times in 5 minutes, what's your name? And why are you doing here? Or do I know you? Or sometimes they're a little more aggressive and I don't want you here. I don't know who you are. And we're not taught how to respond to those people emotionally very well. And I think we tend to kind of shut ourselves off from that. And I think I found that with our couple friends, because Ron didn't remember who they were and we couldn't do the things that we used to do as, couples. And they would come to visit, but it was very uncomfortable for them. And that made me uncomfortable. And in hindsight, it would have been, I don't know, better or easier maybe if I could have just had one-on-one conversations with them on how you deal with somebody with dementia. So relaxation, engage your senses, music, pets. And I used to sometimes just put on the headphones for like 5 minutes. Like I used to do when my children were little. I'd go and lock myself in the bathroom, which is probably not the best parenting model in the world, but I would go lock myself in the bathroom, just put my headphones on, and you couldn't hear the little, Mom, are you in there? Mom, are you in there? And I did tend to do that a little bit with Ron too, even though I didn't remember what my name was. He was curious to know where I was most of the time. But just that 5 minutes where you take a little mental break. So relaxation exercises. Meditation is supposed to be such a good thing for you. I am not a very good meditator, I'll have to admit that. Even though my middle son and his wife run a meditation studio, I'm not the best example of it, but I don't think you have to have your own mantra and you don't have to sit cross-legged and maybe hover off the mat a few inches to meditate. By that I just mean stilling your mind a little bit. And it's hard to do because it's just whirl, 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 whirl. And the one thing my daughter-in-law said to me is, don't concentrate on the thoughts. Just let the thoughts come and go. I know we often think, well, maybe I'll just have that drink of wine, that'll settle me down, or I'll have that extra coffee. And I mean, that's fine occasionally. I'm not saying don't ever do that, but just be aware that if you start to over-medicate yourself with that kind of thing, to maybe cut back and get your rest. And I found with my husband, he was getting up almost every hour at night, not knowing where he was and wanting to leave and wanting to, go somewhere. And it was, in a way, it was like having a baby, and you really are not getting the sleep that you need. So when I had some of the caregivers that would come, that are provided through Alberta Health Services, they would come for 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon. I would go to my daughter's house and sleep, because that's the best thing you can do for me. I can go and catch up on that rest. I thought this was an interesting little saying, and it's just what we talk about is just sometimes, just that little tiny space where you just do a little introspection, just to give yourself permission to just go there. So you can't help others if you don't take care of yourself first. And it's not selfish. It's absolutely necessary.